Maya had always felt like she was living in the shadows of everyone else's story. Growing up, she never quite fit into the world's idea of beauty. She wasn't ugly, but she wasn't the type to turn heads when she walked into a room. There was a certain loneliness in that, but she didn't let it stop her. She had her own quiet strength. At 28, she was working hard to get back into shape, to rediscover herself and reclaim her confidence. But still, a recurring thought gnawed at her: she was always the second choice. This feeling had haunted her for as long as she could remember. Friends would get picked for teams before her, dates would cancel last minute, and relationships always felt like she was the backup option. It wasn't that people didn't like her, it was that they didn't see her as the one. Then came Luke. Luke was 33, charismatic in a way that made people feel like they were the only person in the room when he spoke to them. Maya met him one fateful weekend at a mutual friends gathering. Their connection was instant, like some invisible force had woven their lives together in an unspoken understanding. They spent hours talking, laughing, and sharing stories of their lives. He made her feel seen in ways she hadn't felt in years. After a few weeks of weekend outings and late-night conversations, Maya began to think this could be something special. Luke told her he was single. He seemed so sincere and she believed him. Their bond grew stronger, deeper with each passing day, like a quiet storm she could almost feel but never see coming. There was something about him that felt familiar, comforting even. Maybe, just maybe, she thought this was her moment to be someone's first choice. But as they spent more time together, something changed. It wasn't anything big at first, just a lingering sense of unease, a small detail here or there that didn't quite add up. Then one evening, as they were sitting in his car after a night out, Luke's phone buzzed on the dashboard. He didn't see the message, but Maya did. The name on the screen was clear: Emily. And she knew that name. Emily was the woman Luke had mentioned a few times, always in passing as a good friend of his. But now, something in the pit of Maya's stomach twisted. Good friends didn't send texts that made your phone buzz repeatedly, especially at this time of night. That night, Maya confronted him. "Luke, what's going on with Emily?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though her heart was racing. His face tightened, his eyes shifting uncomfortably as he glanced down at the phone. "Maya, I didn't want to tell you like this, but she's my girlfriend." Maya froze, feeling the ground slip beneath her. The words didn't make sense. The weekends, the laughter, the intimacy, it was all a lie. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to break the mirror that showed her reflection. How had she been so stupid? How had she not seen it? But the anger never came. Instead, a deep sadness settled in her chest, mixed with a confusing sense of betrayal and understanding. Luke's eyes were filled with regret, and she knew deep down that he loved Emily. He wasn't the kind of guy to hurt anyone intentionally. "I didn't want to hurt you," Luke said quietly, his voice raw with guilt. "I never meant for it to go this far." Maya swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the situation settle in. Her hand gripped the door handle as if trying to hold on to something solid in the midst of the storm. "Then why did you tell me you were single?" Her voice cracked. "Why did you let me fall for you?" Luke closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. "Because I felt something real with you. Something I don't feel with Emily. But that doesn't change anything. I love her. I really do." Maya could feel the tears threatening to spill over, but she held them back. He had to be strong. She wasn't going to cry over him. Not when she was finally learning to value herself. "I can't do this anymore, Luke," she said, her voice firm despite the storm of emotions inside her. "I'm not a second choice. I'm not your safe zone. I deserve better than that." Luke reached out, but she pulled away before his fingers could touch hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his eyes filled with remorse. "I truly am." She nodded slowly. "I know you are. But I can't be the one you run to when things get rough. Not anymore." As she walked away from the car that night, Maya felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't the kind of freedom she had imagined, but it was enough to know that she had finally chosen herself. She had been the second choice for too long, but no more. Maya wasn't perfect and she knew that, but she was enough. She wasn't going to wait for someone to choose her. She was going to choose herself for once. The next morning she woke up early, pulled on her sneakers and headed out for a long jog. She didn't know where the road would take her, but for the first time in a long time she didn't care. She was ready to keep moving forward, to become the woman she had always deserved to be, strong, confident, and most importantly, first in her own life. As for Luke, he would have to figure things out with Emily on his own. Maya was done being anyone's second choice. She was ready for something real. Something just for her. And she was going to make it happen. Maya's story was one of resilience. It was about the painful lessons learned in love, betrayal, and the deep realization that you are always your best first choice. The days following Maya's confrontation with Luke were hard, but in a way, they felt like the beginning of something new. She had expected the sting of heartbreak to last longer, but there was something powerful in choosing herself. Something that felt like reclaiming a part of her soul that had been lost for far too long. Weeks passed and life slowly returned to its rhythm. Maya continued her workouts, though they now carried a renewed sense of purpose. Her body wasn't perfect yet, but she could feel the change. It wasn't just physical, it was something deeper, a growing strength in her heart, a confidence she hadn't realized was always within her. She wasn't just getting back into shape, she was rediscovering who she truly was. But, as with all things in life, the past has a way of creeping up on you when you least expect it. It was one cold evening in late October when Maya's phone buzzed. She was sitting at her kitchen table, a cup of tea in her hands, when she saw his name on the screen. Luke. Her breath hitched for a moment. The decision she had made to cut him out was still fresh, but a part of her had wondered if he'd ever reach out. A part of her had thought he might regret his actions, that he might fight for what they had. "Do you miss me?" she asked herself silently, but before she could dwell on the thought, she opened the message. "Hey Maya. I know this might sound crazy, but I need to talk to you. I think I owe you an explanation. I don't want to complicate things, but I can't stop thinking about our conversation. Can we meet?" Maya sat still for a few moments, considering the message. A part of her felt a sudden urge to pick up the phone and say, "Of course I'll meet you." But another part of her, the stronger, wiser part, knew better. She had already made the hard choice once. She had already chosen herself. But she was curious. Too curious to ignore it. She replied, "Maya, we can meet. But I'm not interested in revisiting the past. I've made my peace." He agreed quickly, and they set a time to meet at a quiet cafe downtown. When Maya walked into the cafe, she saw him sitting in the corner, his eyes scanning the room anxiously. He was still the same Luke, the same charm in his smile, the same easy way he carried himself. But Maya couldn't ignore the faint sadness in his eyes, the weight of regret that seemed to follow him. "Hey," she said, walking toward the table. She gave him a small smile, but there was no warmth in it. Just distance. The kind of distance she had fought so hard to create. "Hey," Luke replied, standing up to pull out the chair for her. "Thanks for meeting me." Maya sat down, folding her hands on the table. She wasn't here to make small talk. She was here for closure. "I just wanted to apologize, Maya," Luke said, his voice softer than she had expected. "I was selfish and I didn't think about how my actions would affect you. You didn't deserve that. I was dishonest and I'm sorry." Maya's gaze softened, but she didn't speak. She wasn't going to make it easy for him. He needed to own up to what he had done, to the choices he had made. "I never intended to hurt you," Luke continued. "I thought I could have both, Emily and you. I know now how messed up that was. But I had feelings for you, Maya. I still do. I thought I could balance it all, but I can't. I messed up and I'm asking for a chance to fix things, to at least make it right with you." Maya took a deep breath. She had been prepared for him to try to justify his actions, but hearing him say the words out loud still stung. He still wanted her. After everything, after knowing what he had done, he still thought he could come back. But Maya wasn't that person anymore. The girl who once waited in the shadows for a man to choose her. That girl no longer existed. She was strong now, and she knew that her worth wasn't defined by anyone else's choices. "Luke," she said, her voice steady. "I think you're a good person. And I think you've learned a hard lesson. But I'm not here for you to fix things. I'm not the one who needs fixing. I don't need to be a part of your mess anymore." He looked at her, his eyes wide with disbelief, but Maya could see the pain in them. It was the kind of pain she had once thought she'd see in herself, but now it didn't feel like her problem. "I'm not angry anymore," she continued, her words gentle but firm. "I was hurt, yes, but I've moved past it. You need to fix things with Emily if that's what you want. But I'm not your second choice. I never will be. I'm not someone's safe zone anymore. I'm enough on my own." Luke opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His expression faltered, and for a brief moment, Maya saw the vulnerability he had tried so hard to hide. But it wasn't her responsibility to heal him. Maya smiled, but it wasn't soft. It was a smile of someone who had finally found peace in their own heart. "I hope you figure things out, Luke," she said. "But I'm done." And with that she stood up and walked out of the cafe. The cold air hit her face as she stepped onto the sidewalk, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like she was breathing again. She wasn't going to wait for anyone to choose her. She had already chosen herself, and that made all the difference. The weeks that followed were filled with growth. Maya continued to focus on herself, on her health, her career, her friendships. She had learned a valuable lesson, that self-worth didn't come from being chosen by someone else. It came from choosing yourself every single day. And as she walked down that road of rediscovery, Maya realized she wasn't just moving on from her past. She was building a future where she was her own first choice. It had been several months since Maya had seen Luke. Life had unfolded in ways she hadn't expected. A new job, new friendships, and the kind of self-assurance she hadn't known was possible. She spent her weekends exploring new places, enjoying the freedom of not being tied to anyone's expectations. Her body was stronger, her mind clearer, and her heart was learning how to love itself again. But just when Maya thought she had it all figured out, life threw her a curveball. One chilly Saturday morning in early spring, Maya was at her favorite coffee shop, a quiet corner of the city that she'd grown fond of. She had a book in her hands, a steaming latte beside her, when a voice she never thought she'd hear again echoed through the small cafe. "Hi, Maya." She froze. It was Luke. Her pulse quickened, and for a moment her mind raced with confusion and curiosity. She hadn't expected to see him again. In fact, she had moved on from that chapter of her life, but here he was, standing in front of her. She looked up, forcing a neutral expression. "Luke, what are you doing here?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something different about him. Something unsettling. His usual charm seemed faded, replaced by a heaviness that hung around him. "Can we talk, please?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost pleading. Maya hesitated. She had worked so hard to let go, to find peace. But something about the way he looked at her, broken, almost defeated, tugged at a part of her that she thought was long gone. "Sure," she replied, her voice steady. "But just for a few minutes. I've got things to do." He nodded, and they both took a seat at the small table by the window. Maya didn't say anything, waiting for him to speak. The silence between them was thick, heavy with all the unspoken words that had accumulated over the months. "Listen," Luke started, his voice trembling slightly. "I've been trying to reach out to you for a while now, but you've been so distant. And I get it. I hurt you. I know that." Maya nodded, not because she needed the acknowledgement, but because she was listening, waiting for the real reason he was here. "I've been with Emily for years," he continued, his voice growing more pained. "I don't love her the way I should. I never did. It's been a constant cycle of us breaking up, getting back together, and then breaking up again. But this last time, things were different. I found out something about her that changed everything." Maya's curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Luke's eyes flickered, his gaze dropping to his hands. "I found out that she's been seeing someone else. For months." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected that. Emily, the woman who had been so central to their dynamic, had been cheating on Luke all along? "But why are you telling me this?" Maya asked, confusion clouding her thoughts. "What does this have to do with me?" Luke looked up, his face twisted in a mix of frustration and anguish. "Because I thought it would fix everything, Maya. I thought if I could just get you back, I could start over. I thought that if I ended things with Emily for good, I could have a chance with you." Maya's heart was racing, but not in the way it had when they first met. Now it was racing with a mix of disbelief and concern. "Luke, this is not how you fix things. You don't jump from one broken relationship to another. You need to heal, not jump into something else." He stared at her, his eyes filled with desperation. "I know. But I thought if I could just fix everything with you, then it would all make sense. We could be together. I've never stopped thinking of—" Maya felt the weight of his words, but instead of the old pang of longing, she felt something else. Pity. She wasn't the same person who had been pulled into his web of half-truths and second choices. She had moved on. She had learned to stand on her own, to not rely on anyone else for her happiness. But just as she was about to respond, something strange happened. A woman walked into the cafe. She was tall, elegant, with a presence that immediately drew attention. She scanned the room and her eyes locked on Luke. Her face lit up as if she had been searching for him. She approached their table, a knowing smile on her lips. "Luke," she said softly, her voice warm, "there you are. I've been looking all over for you." Maya's breath caught. The woman was familiar. Too familiar. The woman sat down beside Luke without hesitation, placing her hand on his. It was the same woman from the text that had once buzzed on Luke's phone, the same woman who had been the good friend that Maya had never questioned before. Emily. Maya's mind spun as she looked between the two of them. The realization hit her like a punch to the stomach. "Wait, what?" Maya stammered, the pieces slowly falling into place. You two are still together? You've been with her this whole time." Emily smiled softly, her eyes locking with Maya's. "Oh, we're not just together, Maya," she said, her tone almost amused. "We've been married for 5 years. And we've been trying to have a child for a while now." Maya's blood ran cold. The pieces of the puzzle she had once tried to ignore, the texts, the constant secrecy, began to make sense, but not in the way she had expected. You're married?" Maya whispered, her mind racing with disbelief. "And you've been lying to me this whole time?" Luke's face turned a deep shade of red. "Maya, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It was never about you. It was about me and my own mess. I'm sorry." Maya stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. "You've been married this whole time?" Her voice was trembling now with anger, not just at Luke but at herself. "You used me. Both of you used me." Luke opened his mouth to speak, but Emily cut him off. "Maya, it's not what you think. We've been trying to make this work with Luke, but he's not the only one who's been complicated. We've both been seeing other people. For years." Maya took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. The world felt like it was collapsing around her. Everything she thought she knew about the situation, everything she thought she had figured out, was a lie. "I think I've had enough," Maya said, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and anger. "I don't need any of this." And with that she walked out of the cafe, her world shattering in ways she hadn't anticipated. But as she stepped into the cold air outside, something new clicked inside her. She had learned. She had finally learned not to let anyone else define her, not even Luke or Emily. And whatever they were doing, it was no longer her problem. Her heart was hers again. And nothing would ever take that from her. Maya walked away from that meeting knowing one thing for certain: no one would ever control her story again. As the weeks passed, she focused on the one thing that mattered most: healing. With every step forward, the past grew smaller, a distant memory of a life she was finally able to leave behind. She was no longer the second choice. She was the first. And that was all she needed to know. The days that followed that fateful meeting in the cafe felt like a blur to Maya. She had left behind a chapter in her life that she had once thought defined her, but now, with clarity that felt almost surreal, she knew it was time to move forward, stronger than ever. The shock of seeing Luke and Emily together, of uncovering the layers of lies that had been carefully wrapped around her, was painful. But it was also freeing. She had never seen it coming: the marriage, the secret life, the deceit. But in a strange way, the truth had released her. As the weeks unfolded, Maya focused on herself in ways she never had before. She spent more time on her own, rediscovering the things that made her happy. She traveled to places she had always wanted to visit but had put on hold for others. She started a journal where she wrote down her thoughts, her dreams, and her goals. The pages filled up faster than she could have imagined. There was no longer a need for validation from anyone. She was enough. And for the first time in her life, she was becoming the person she had always wanted to be, not for someone else but for herself. One crisp Sunday afternoon, Maya was enjoying a quiet walk through a park near her apartment when her phone buzzed. She hesitated for a moment, half expecting it to be another message from Luke. But when she checked the screen, it wasn't his name that appeared. It was an unknown number. She opened the message with a slight feeling of dread, wondering who it might be now. A known number. "Hi Maya, it's Ben. I know you don't know me, but we met last summer at a work event. I was hoping we could grab coffee sometime and catch up." Maya furrowed her brows. Ben. She vaguely remembered meeting someone named Ben. a friendly guy who had been at that networking event with a few mutual colleagues. But they hadn't really kept in touch since. The message was harmless enough, but the timing was curious. She debated for a few moments. She hadn't been on a real date in months, and honestly she hadn't really been open to the idea of letting someone in. But then again, the more she thought about it, the more she realized this wasn't a date. This wasn't about moving on from anything. It was just two people reconnecting. Maya. Sure, that sounds nice. How about next weekend? The day they met for coffee arrived faster than she expected. Maya wore a simple, cozy sweater and jeans, feeling more at ease than she had in a long time. When she walked into the cafe, she immediately spotted Ben sitting by the window, his eyes scanning the room, a casual smile on his face when he saw her. Hey Maya. It's good to see you, he greeted, standing up to hug her briefly. Good to see you too, Ben, Maya replied, taking a seat across from him. They exchanged pleasantries, talking about work, life, and mutual friends. The conversation was easy, natural, and in no way forced. Maya felt something she hadn't felt in ages, relaxed. She wasn't trying to impress him, wasn't second-guessing everything she said. She was just herself. As they sipped their coffee and laughed over shared stories, Ben suddenly asked, So, how's everything going with you, Maya? I know last time we talked you were going through a lot. Maya paused for a moment, then smiled gently. I'm good actually. Really good. I've spent a lot of time focusing on myself, rediscovering who I am outside of everything else. I guess you could say I'm in a better place now. Ben looked at her intently. You seem different. You seem at peace. Maya's smile deepened. I am. I think for the first time, I'm not waiting for anyone to give me approval. I'm living for myself, and that's been life-changing. Ben grinned. That's awesome. I think a lot of people don't realize that until it's too late. Maya nodded, her heart feeling lighter with each passing second. She wasn't thinking about Luke or Emily or anything that had happened in the past. As they wrapped up their coffee and made plans to meet again, Maya walked out of the cafe feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a while. Maybe she wasn't ready for anything serious yet, but that was okay. She was still finding herself, still learning what she wanted. But the most important thing? She wasn't waiting for anyone to define her anymore. A few days later, as Maya was scrolling through her social media feed, she saw something that made her pause. Luke had posted a photo of himself and Emily, arms around each other, smiling in front of a sunset. The caption read, "Starting over." It was the first time in months that Maya had seen something from him, and the words hit her like a wave. She had expected him to reach out, to apologize one last time, but this was different. This was him moving on, finally. At that moment, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling a pang of jealousy or bitterness, Maya felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just a deep, deep sense of peace. She didn't need closure from him. She didn't need him to validate her feelings. She had found something far greater than any apology or explanation. She had found her own strength. She set her phone down, closed her eyes, and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Weeks later, as Maya sat at her desk at work, deep in thought, she realized something. The version of her who had once yearned for validation, the girl who had been second choice in someone else's story, no longer existed. That person had been replaced by someone who understood her worth, who knew that no one was ever going to define her again. The realization was simple yet profound. Choosing yourself isn't just about walking away from toxic relationships or finding someone new. It's about loving who you are, flaws and all, and knowing that you are always enough. The road wasn't always easy. It was filled with bumps, doubts, and unexpected twists. But Maya had learned something crucial. The most important relationship she would ever have was the one she built with herself. And no one, not even Luke or Emily, could ever take that away. Maya stood up from her desk, walked to the window, and looked out at the world ahead. It was hers for the taking. The future was wide open, and she was ready for whatever came next. Months later, Maya found herself on a plane to Paris, the city she had always dreamed of visiting. She sat by the window, watching the clouds drift by, feeling lighter than she ever had before. She wasn't running from anything. She was simply living. And in that moment she knew that her story was still unfolding. But this time she was the one writing it. For the first time in her life, Maya was exactly where she needed to be. And that was enough.